morning, buenos dias, bon dia. It's great to have you all here this morning. My name is Lee Ullman, and I run the MIT Sloan Latin America office. Today, we're fortunate to have three of the main entrepreneurial centers from MIT with us. We have Bill Ouellette from the Martin Trust Center. We have Travis Hunter from the MIT Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, and we have Dina Sharif from Legatum. With them, we have two of the Legatum Fellows, Fernando, the co-founder from Play Business Mexico, and Andres from Zippy, the co-founder of Zippy from Brazil. The MIT Sloan Latin America office is part of MIT Sloan Global Programs. And as part of the activities we do, we try to bring MIT knowledge to the region of Latin America. With that, entrepreneurship and innovation is key to what we do. And aside from this webinar this morning, we are also running the MIT Sloan 100K Latam, which I'll post, but we hope that you participate as part of some of the events that we do to support and try to help out the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Latin America. With that, I want to start and pass the mic over to the guru of entrepreneurship and anti-fragile at MIT, Bill Ouellette. So Bill, thanks for being here bright and early.
Thanks, Lee, very much. And it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. I know it is early, very early for some of you. So our apologies, but hopefully we'll make it worthwhile. And I also just want to say guru is not correct. I'm just older and have some wisdom, and wisdom comes from making more mistakes than anybody else and learning from them. But thank you very much. I just want to start off here with an email that I got yesterday, opened up, and I just want to read it to you to give you a sense as to what's going on here. And really the question is, we're in an unprecedented crisis. What does that mean for entrepreneurship? So it says, Bill, thank you very much. I appreciate your work. I really appreciate it for sure, and we are adapting it to our environment. I am a co-founder of a social enterprise dedicated to teaching entrepreneurship in Ecuador. We have focused our job in rural areas in urban, depressed neighborhoods where the economic and political crisis has pushed people to struggle every day to find a way to pay their bills and to buy their food. Entrepreneurship here is an answer to unemployment. More than an answer, it is like a safety float. We will work with women mainly, giving them additional tools to manage rights issues. I have no data to share yet, but I am very confident that I will very soon. I will write some nice stories about entrepreneurs in rural areas reaching sustainability using the 24-step approach. Regards, Ana Lucia Correa, and she is a entrepreneur educator in Ecuador. And I just tell you because I get these all the time now, and it is very heartwarming to see. This crisis has created a dislocation like nothing else we've seen in our lifetime. I'm sure we've had horrible things like 9/11, but those were an event. This is continuous. This is a fundamental change. And the question is, what does it mean? Do people run back into the big corporations, or do they embrace entrepreneurship more? And I want to tell you what we have seen here at the Trust Center, and we've seen more broadly at MIT and well beyond, and then give you some guidance and some resources that should be able to help you as we go forward. And I would really welcome questions here, because I know what I'm going to say, but it's much more interesting when I hear what you all have to say and can react. So, and please feel free to go through and just throw things in the chat, comments, questions, whatever you'd like. I'm going to make 10 key points. And the headline here is that innovation-driven entrepreneurship has become significantly more important over the past decade, but during the crisis, that has accelerated even more. And I can give you many, many stories. Our role at MIT has increased dramatically, the Trust Center. We are asked to do so many different things now. And I want to talk to you why that is the case. So 10 points. The first I want to make And if Jacqueline or someone can just type these into the chat so that people can see them. that would make it easier. The first one I want to talk about, the definition of entrepreneurship. It's really been changing, and I want to say that it has changed significantly. When you saw Anna's email, she was talking about entrepreneurship to help people have startups. And when I first started at this job over 10 years ago, I was just looking yesterday, is I equated teaching entrepreneurship with creating startups. And then there was a migration that, oh, it's not just about startups. Our job as educators is to create entrepreneurs, and then they create startups. But still there was this intractable link between entrepreneurs and startups. And I'm not saying that that's not there. That's an extreme version of it. But what I've learned over the past 10 years, and especially over the past 100 days, is that entrepreneurship is much more than just startups. Entrepreneurship is a mindset, a skill set, and a way of doing business that is incredibly important in this rapidly changing world. So entrepreneurship no longer should just equal startup. It's a mindset, it's a skill set, and it's a way of doing business that is relevant if you are in a startup environment, if you're in a corporate environment, if you're in a government environment, if you're in an academic environment, even in your personal lives. And that is going to be increasingly important. Point number two, why is that more important? I'm going to put this under the title of Siegel's Law for Sue Siegel, who I teach with, who is a chief information officer she's from Puerto Rico, by the way, and she is chief innovation officer at General Electric until recently. And what Sue said was very interesting. And she said, the world will never be as slow as it is, will never be slower than it is today. This right now is as slow as you will ever see it. Going forward, it will only get faster. It will not get less slow. And let me just repeat that. We thought it was crazy like 2 years ago when Brexit and were happening and Trump was happening, or 4 years ago. Well, oh, can't get any more crazy than this. Those seem like slow times compared to where we are today. And this is just the trend when you start seeing it over and over again. And when you think about what's driven the world economy, it has been two fundamental laws. It has been Moore's law, and when Moore stated it, everybody was shocked that the power of the chip microprocessor will double every 18 months. It hasn't been precisely true, but it has basically been true since he said that. And that has had profound impact. And not only has it profound impact, it changed the way we think about the world, understanding that computers are just going to get more and more powerful. And so things that aren't possible today will be possible. So having this kind of mental model of Moore's law has been incredibly powerful to how we have not just innovated from a technical standpoint, but how we approach it and think about it. And the other one, by the way, is Metcalfe's law, that the power of the network is exponentially related to the number of nodes on the network. In other words, networking people together benefits everybody. It's not a zero-sum game. And that also changed the perspective. And likewise, how those two laws change the perspective, when you think about Sue Siegel's law, that it is going to get faster and faster and faster. There are going to be more crises. If you think that this COVID-19 is the end, you are wrong. If you think that once Donald Trump goes, that it's going to return to calmness, you are wrong. There are constantly going to be more unexpected events that are happen with increased rapidity. And so once you realize that, you realize that what we've been trained for and how we have approached the world has to change. We have been taught management at schools of management. And what is that? They were started on Taylor's time and motion study. We're taught financial leverage, how to do things that will optimize systems, that will make them more predictable, that will get every last cent out of it and de-risk them. When you do that, you create optimized systems and everything that you want, but you also create fragile systems that will break when hit by external forces, that we're hit by adversity or crisis, or in scientific terms, external perturbations. And so these management systems that have been optimized, you've seen the supply chains and things like that. As soon as this crisis happens, boom, they're breaking. You're seeing record number of bankruptcies. And so we have to think about how do we move to address this new world where things are changing and external perturbations are happening at an increasingly rapid rate. And that leads us to anti-fragility. And so point number 3 is management versus entrepreneurship. You know, management is still going to be required, but that dial is going to be turned down and this entrepreneurship dial is going to be turned up. How do we not manage existing organizations, but how do we create new organizations like Zippy that address the new world order? Because in a crisis, one window closes over here. And guess what? The existing organizations were optimized to manage that window, but that window just closed, be it restaurants or travel or cruise ship, whatever you want it to be. And you've got to find the new ones, and you have to create new organizations to go after those very, very rapidly. So it's not that management is going to go away. It's going to be turned down, and as Siegel's law takes more and more effect, that entrepreneurship dial has to be turned up. We have to create new organizations to handle that, and therefore we have to have more entrepreneurs who can handle that. So this gets to the fact, the 4th point I want to say, that key factors of entrepreneurship that have proven to be very successful over the past 100 days have included the following. They've always been there, but now it's really obvious. The first one of the key factors is excellence and diverse sense making. You have to have networks where you're getting different feedback, not just ones that you like, not just, you know, that are very narrow. You have to have very broad kind of inputs to your system. And I can go into any one of these, but I'm going to leave enough time for questions. The second one is you have to prioritize. You have to figure out what are the most important things to address right now, and you can't do everything. And this is what entrepreneurship is about. It's insufficient resources, pursuing opportunities with insufficient resources and resources that are beyond your control. So we have to be very good at prioritizing. Third is nobody knows anything. There was a great talk we had by one of the founders of Netflix, the co-founder and first CEO, Mark Randolph. I really recommend the book. You know, that's not going to work. And he talks about that will never work, I'm sorry, which is what his wife told him when he said, I'm going to start this company called Netflix. And he said, you know what? She was right. It never would have worked the way we originally thought because we didn't know things. And what we had to do was go out and experiment and have hypotheses and try them and get feedback. So this ability to understand that nobody knows anything, and your entrepreneurship is really about taking a hypothesis, testing it, and iterating very, very rapidly, has never been more obvious. If anybody knew, you know, said they could tell you what was going to happen 10 days from now for the past 100 days, they're full of beans. It just has been impossible. All you can do is get hypotheses and test them and start moving in those directions. The 4th thing is action. You have to have a bias to action. You can't sit around and analyzing in a world where you don't know what's going to happen. It's unclear. You don't have all the data. So you have to run small experiments and act. And then once you act, this next thing is you have to analyze and react to that and try and then say, okay, I acted, what did I learn? And have that feedback loop to take the next action. And critical within this is clock speed, you know, is how quickly can you do that? And reacting very, very rapidly allows you to figure out when this window closed over here, which window opened up, and where's the opportunity there, and how can we get to that very, very rapidly? The other thing that's become very clear in what we teach that's really important is leadership is essential here, but leadership has to have simple plans. You have to have very clear messages. So for instance, when we did our anti-fragile speaker series, We could have done many, many different things, but we said, this is all about giving people hope. It's giving people strength. It's giving people leadership, and it's giving people community. Those are the 4 things we're going to do. And if that's what you want, then that's what we serve up to you. And when every speaker came in, we said, these are our things we're doing. Please line up what you're going to say to do that. If you can't, it's probably not a good fit. But you have to have very clear guidance as to where you're going. Is that oversimplification at times? It is. But you know what? In times of crisis where you have to move quickly, fast clock speed, you have to be, nobody knows anything. You have to have simple principles that you proceed so you can lead people. And then you have to execute. You have to execute. It said in times of peace, priorities can be strategy, people, execution. In times of war, it's execution, people, strategy. So when you get in a crisis, you have to flip those priorities and go get after them. So execution is raised. And the last thing I'll say is crisis with entrepreneurship is adversity. It's the chess table has just been knocked over and everybody's on a level playing field. And you know what? If you're an entrepreneur, that should energize you. And this goes to the mindset. A crisis is a time where you should be energized and see opportunity, not be overcome with anxiety and hanging on to the past. So you need to be energized to find those opportunities. You then need to use all the skills to analyze it. You need to iterate and execute with fast clock speed, and you will produce positive, sustainable solutions of new companies. It's no accident that many of the great companies, more than you would ever imagine, are and would expect, are created in a down cycle. So that was 4. The next thing I'll say, I'm going to run out of time here, is we've realized in this, there's actually a 4th crisis going on here. Everybody talks about a healthcare crisis that led to an economic crisis that's led to a humanitarian crisis. But there's a 4th one here that Brad Feld pointed out very well, and you've seen it ongoing, is there's a mental health crisis. Is that people have to be strong in this, and we have to acknowledge that people are people, and the element of keeping mental strength throughout a crisis is very important. And we've added that to our programs as well, and you'll see it when I refer you to the Anti-Fragile Speaker Series. There's a whole talk about that. The 6th thing is, when you're doing this, it's very important that you are not just saying, oh, a crisis, we love a crisis. It's very important that you start with empathy and then get to the next play. I should have started off this, and I failed in it today because an error of mine, but I should have started off wishing everyone condolences for all the hardship that this has created. We never would have wished for this pandemic. And I truly mean that. But after we have expressed the empathy, and then we have to move to what is the next play. And there's a great coach named Mike Krzyzewski at Duke University, and he always says to the players, next play, no matter what happens, you have to think next play. So while we are sympathetic, we want to do everything we can for what we have to say, it is what it is at this point. We never would have wished a pandemic, but now that it is, what's the next play? So start with empathy, but get to the next play. The 7th thing that's very encouraging, and I think the other panelists will agree with me here, is we've seen a real rise in purposeful entrepreneurship. You know, you could have profiteering out of a crisis. People saying, you know, there's a shortage of masks, and I'm going to hoard masks, and I'm going to sell them at a profit. The people who did that were roundly, you know, brought down by society here in the United States. And I'm very happy about that. I'm very proud of that. But social media has done that. It's allowed people to strike back at profiteers. So the need for having a purpose in your what you do is not only a good thing from a moral standpoint now, it is a good thing from an economic standpoint as well. So profiteering is not the way to go right now. We develop principled entrepreneurs, and that is turning out to be not only a good thing from a moral standpoint, but those companies sustain themselves and have much more of an impact and have much more positive economic results. The eighth thing I would say is that, and you see this sometimes from political leaders and the like, oh, if we just get to, a vaccine in October, everything's going to be okay. If we just get to this. This is not the way to approach a crisis and not how entrepreneurs should think. And we teach them not to. There's a thing called the Stockdale paradox. And this was from a prisoner of war in North Vietnam, John Stockdale. And he and John McCain noticed that the people who said, we're going to get out at Christmas, just hold on till Christmas, and then we will get out because something's going to happen. Those people did not last. They did not make it as POWs because Christmas came and then they just basically lost their hope and then they didn't make it. But you have to have long-term kind of belief that we are going to succeed. We are going to defeat this crisis. It may not be today, it may not be a week from now, but ultimately we will come out on the other side and we will win. And not putting a time frame on that, but having long-term belief in it is clearly now seen as the way more productively to think about a crisis and put you at the forefront. Number 9, geography matters a lot less today than it did 100 days ago. Boise, Idaho, let me tell you today, looks a hell of a lot better than it did 100 days ago. Where I am right now in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire, looks a lot better today than it did 100 days ago. Because of not just technology, but because of social norms now, we can connect here. We have 238 people here from all around the world. Geography just does not matter as much as it once did. Is there benefits to kind of clustering and being in locations that have serendipitous physical collisions? Yes, there are also big disadvantages to that right now. And it is changing social norms that will never go back completely. And the last thing is, I want to say the mindset, skill set, and way of doing business is what makes an entrepreneur. It is the way that we approach it, that we say, we are energized by adversity, we are energized by a crisis. That first is how you go at it. We're willing to be different. We're going to lead here. But you then have to have the skill set as well. It's not enough to just have the mindset. You have to have the skill set to be able to do that. And the skill set is the knowledge, as we talked about with Anna, with things like the disciplined entrepreneurship approach, but it's also how do you do fundraising? How do you do other parts of it? So you must have the skill set, you must have the knowledge about how to do it, but you also must have the capability in the real world to do it. Because entrepreneurship is not a science, it's a craft, and it requires you to take fundamental principles and learn how to apply them in the real world to make a real difference. And this is the MIT motto, mens et manus, mind and hand. So we talk about the first H is the heart, the second H is the head, to know what to do. The heart is it's the spirit, the mindset. The head is the knowledge, but that's not sufficient. You have to have the hands to be able to do it. And the fourth H is the home. And this is community-based. When I was at IBM, I got all the resources we need to attack a project, and it was expected that we control those resources. The fundamental nature of entrepreneurship was first defined by Howard Stevenson at Harvard, who said, entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunities with resources beyond your control. And what that means is entrepreneurs are much more efficient than the previous model of command, control, and conquer. By that we mean we set up communities of people who are productive to work with. And then as we need things, we essentially barter them with each other. And that is a much more efficient model. And that is a community-based model where we're helping each other and we're getting much better utilization of resources and they're more up to date and they're more connected. So it allows us to have a much broader network so that we don't get caught up in crises by having that narrow bandwidth or line of sight. and it changes our ability to compete in a dynamic way without having to be bound to resources that suddenly become an anchor on us. We're able to move in a more agile way. So for this, I would say, what is it? I'm going to go back and just close now and say, what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is more and more being, kind of looked at as anti-fragility. And what is anti-fragility? Fragility is what I was talking about was, when you're fragile and something bad happens, you get hit, you break. That's the negative condition. I think everybody understands here. That's very difficult. It's not that you don't want to optimize systems, but we need more than just that now. We can't have fragility. And then people say, well, I want to be robust. I'm just going to do my thing and ignore that COVID's happening. No, that is not the idea here. COVID is happening. You have to acknowledge it. Anyone who does not is actually building a fragile system, because COVID is real. Other things, racial injustice is real, other factors that are coming. You have to take that in and then adjust your plans. And not only so you can't keep doing the same thing. You can't just ignore it. You can't just be resilient or robust and just plow forward, ignore it. We must be anti-fragile, which means when these things happen, we get stronger in that. And so we're talking to Latin America, and I don't know much about soccer, but I can tell you in basketball, when you would see players that were very good in the first quarter, when it was very clear and the plans had all been laid out and it happened just the way you expected. But as the game went on and more uncertainty happened and there was more adversity, there were certain players who got better and better and better. Larry Bird, for instance, he got energized by the adversity, by the unpredictability, by, kind of things happening at a faster and faster pace. And that's what entrepreneurship is supposed to be about right now. We are training people to be those people who are anti-fragile. They get energized, they know how to handle these new situations, and they know how to work in a community to get stuff done. So with that, Lee, it's 9:02, and I think I'm spot on. Is that right?
Yeah. So Bill, thanks for laying that out for everybody. And I want to know, will you take there are a couple of questions, and I have some questions to ask you. Are you open to that?
That's fire away.
Sure.
Let's do as many as we can.
Excellent. So before we get to the audience, I just want, your last reference to, this is an audience of Latin America, where I know you've been to Colombia, you've been to Chile, you've been to Brazil, you've been around.
Argentina.
Mexico, Argentina, right? So these are countries in the developing world that crisis is the norm.
Yeah.
But this crisis is something totally different, right? It's a crisis that's not just a localized, Argentina's economy imploding or Brazil, but this is global. So how do you deal with entrepreneurs who are now not only faced with their local crisis, but the people that they look up to, the United States, Europe, right, where that's the dream, is now in a crisis? So how do you, address that in this anti-fragile method?
Well, so first of all, when I was an entrepreneur, you looked up to the IBMs, you looked up to the AT&Ts, you looked up to all these other companies, and then all of a sudden, when the game started changing with Moore's law and personal computers came along, the advantage went to the entrepreneurs. So looking up to the United States as being the big established player today is not necessarily something that is promised to them for tomorrow. A lot of innovation is coming from other places. When you look at, and Dina will probably talk about this in hers, you're seeing some of the most dramatic innovation in the mobile space coming from places like Africa back to the United States. There's no, the United States has no manifest destiny on innovation. It's just, they have moved faster than other people. But when you look at Africa, you see a lot of innovation coming back to the United States now. So I think it's basically leveled the playing field. And United States has not been, frankly, used to dealing with the level of chaos that's going on right now. And I know Latin America is very, very different, in the different countries, but I always felt that Latin America had a higher threshold for chaos than the United States. And that is a good characteristic. You might never have wished for it, but it's one of those muscles that you have had to build up and will be an advantage as you go forward.
Excellent. So, Bill, one of the questions that we got from the audience, and this is, to your sports metaphor, is what happens when the team is not prepared, right? So you have some people that are very skilled, but it's an uneven level of skill in the developing world in Latin America. How do you help with these challenges? What advice can you give people to really build a team? Great question.
I don't know who that question came from, and I wish I could see you all and hear your stories, but it is not enough. And if Travis or someone could put up here a link to the Anti-Fragile Speaker Series, we go through and we say, you need to be anti-fragile individual, but individuals don't get things done. Teams get things done. So if you're an anti-fragile individual, great, but you're not going to get things done unless you create an anti-fragile team. And just because you have two anti-fragile people and put them together doesn't make an anti-fragile team. And so you have to get that. The whole point of a community is not that, let me be clear, I am not Karl Marx here. I'm saying, let's have communism. I'm a believer in capitalism, and that people, you need to build communities where everybody's contributing. So when our communities, if someone is contributing and they ask me for a favor, I'm going to help them out. So if Lee calls me up, I'm going to help Lee out because I know that he contributes. Now, if somebody calls me up who doesn't help other people out, I have no obligation to help that person. You need to build strong communities. And there's a saying from Rudyard Kipling that the strength of the pack is in the wolf. So every wolf needs to be strong in the pack. But the strength of the wolf is in the pack. By that we mean that the pack is strong because each wolf is strong. But the wolf is strong, much stronger when it's in the pack, because then when you have a strong pack, it's much more than just the individual strength of them. So my advice is look around, find out who are those people who complement you and give you energy and you can trust, and then you build your community that way. And you will have to curate your community because your community today will vary over time. And so I'm sorry, I wish I could say everyone's great in the world. It's not the case. You have to find those people to create high performance teams, because when you go to do these things that we're talking about, and Andreas will talk about with Zippy, it's really, really hard, and you can't carry along excess baggage. You've got to get people who are committed to the cause that bring something to the table. Every wolf in the pack needs to be strong and carry their own weight, and they have to not only do that, but they have to have this willingness to pay it forward as well and be giving members of the community.
Bill, and just a quick follow-up question. Do you think this can be done in the virtual environment, right? Because today, before, big thing of being entrepreneurs was hanging out together, drinking together, the occasional sleeping together, all of the fun that, those late nights cause. But now we're all virtual and we're not supposed to be, if we live in a socially distant world. So how do you do that? Or what have you been seeing in the last 100 days?
So first of all, I thought nobody drank in Latin America. That's shocking. That's a shocking thing. No, that's a joke. That's a joke, everybody. The honest answer is, when this first happened, so being anti-fragility is, we went out and said, it is what it is. We're all in on virtual. We're going to teach all our classes virtually. We're going to do the Anti-Fragile Speaker Series virtually. We're going to do all that. There's a whole bunch of benefits that are accrued to that. We could get people like Jocko Willink, Coach Calipari. We could get all these people that we couldn't get otherwise. We could do things like we're doing right now and not travel. So I could, you could spend more time recruiting people, getting good people, and then interacting with them. We had no choice. That's what we did. I think there's a lot of benefits to that. I think anyone that tell you that that's that's so much better than the old way, I don't think that's ingenuous. I think that's a bit disingenuous. There are benefits to physical serendipitous collisions, and it's easy right now for some of us to be able to just go online because we already know a whole bunch of people. But what about that young entrepreneur that needs to meet a lot of other people? I am still a little skeptical that they can get the depth of relationship that they need once this thing starts letting up. Now that's right now, people are hiring people. People are getting to know other people. People are getting scholarships. They haven't even met them. They're getting millions of dollars worth of funding. So the world is working right now in a virtual space. But once we go back, I believe that the best one is a hybrid way where you actually can meet people and develop a relationship kind of more, more residentially. And then you can complement that by not having to fly back and forth to places. And so it will be a combination, not all one or the other. And that's usually the case. When you look at the history of innovation, usually you have one dial being turned up and one dial being turned down. It's not like a switch flips and you go to all virtual and you get rid of online. Same thing. I mean, a good example of shopping. We're not going to get rid of physical stores, offline stores. What's happened is the dial for digital commerce has just gone up. And so I think that's the analogy. I would use the same analogy for, can you be all virtual? No, but let me tell you, you need to embrace the technology. You need to embrace the change right now of Zoom, of meeting, whatever it is, and how you can do that with Slack and other channels. And if you don't, you're not being a real entrepreneur. You have to embrace the technology, the change, the enablers of that.
Right. So a question from Argentina using one of your, sporting metaphors is, in Argentina, they're used to improvisation, but how do you go from improvisation in growth to actually processes and actually taking the next step where there's more order and process?
Yeah, great question. So we always talk about you need the spirit of a pirate, but you also need the execution skills of a Navy SEAL. So once you have to think differently, you have to figure out what it is. And we just had this great talk yesterday for our Delta V team about first you nail it and then you scale it. You got to get product market fit. And there's a lot of improvisation in getting product market fit. But once you get product market fit, you then have to scale that. And that involves management. Remember, I said management dial is not turned off, but it's turned down and this is turned up. So you'll see in the evolution of your company, there's a lot of improvisation at the beginning, trying to figure out where's the product market fit, where's the hole. But once you find that hole, you got to march those people through that hole. And then all of a sudden, the processes and kind of more discipline will take over, and management. But, let me just also say, in that improvisation, there are first principles that really help you in that. And that's what we teach.
So Bill, just one or two more questions for you. What is the best mechanism for getting feedback about your company now in this virtual world with the pandemic, right? Because now, even though you say it's easier to get people are being bombarded all the time with requests and they're on Zoom from 9 to 9. So how is it one can get feedback or get some help with what they're actually doing?
Yeah, so people might not like this, but let me just say, I believe deeply in mentorship, but I also believe mentorship, it can be overrated. You have to rely on your own skills and you have to rely on feedback from customers of doing A/B testing and learn how to not get general advice. There are these first principles and you can get those and we make all our stuff available to you. But then you have to focus on what does the customer react to? Remember, nobody knows anything. People can tell you stuff, but what's the truth? Does the customer buy that? Do they click on it to find out more information? And learning the tools of how do you collect and do primary market research? How do you do A/B testing? These are the things that are more important, I believe. It's good to get mentorship, don't get me wrong, but mentorship only gets you so far. You've got to go out and you've got to engage directly with your customers and figure out what do they want, what do they not want in a very systematic way.
So Bill, being mindful of your time, the last question before you have to jump off. You spoke about the last 100 days. So what are some of the lessons being learned around innovation and crisis that you can offer to this Latin America audience about what, aside from the 8 points, what's that one take-home thing that you would say for them so that they can be successful and make it through the next hurdle and the next crisis?
Yeah, there will be more crisis. This is not the end. We're not going to go back. It's just going to increase the number of crises. And to survive that, you need to have the mindset to say, when I see a crisis, I don't get overcome with anxiety. I see it as an opportunity. And I need to have the skill set to be able to handle that. And then I need to be able to build that community to be able to act on it once I say, I'm energized. Here's where I processed it. Here's some of the things I've tested. I think this will work, and then build that community to do that. And find those people to be able to do that. And they are out there, and they are energized, and they are more visible than ever. There's a saying that someone once said to me, the darker the night, the brighter the stars shine. And right now, you can see the stars because the ones who were good, early on in the game when everything was there, well, where are they now in the crisis? The ones who are stepping up right now are the ones you want to party with. Those are the people you want to go to war with. Those are the people that you want to be working with.
That's really awesome. Thanks, Bill, for your inspirational talk. And that idea of the brighter the stars shine in the darkness is a great metaphor to leave us with. So thank you very much. Stay well. And we're going to continue, everyone else, with...
Thank you, Lee. Let me just say, fight the good fight, everybody out there. It's never been more important, and we're depending on it. And it's more of a tight-knit community than we've ever been before. So hopefully I would encourage you all to go look at the Anti-Fragile Speaker Series. It's free. It just steps you through how you can build anti-fragility skill set. And it's been incredibly popular. Did you put the link out there, Travis?
Travis put the link up.
Great. Thanks for having me, Lee. And good luck to everybody else. I wish I could stick around.
All right. Thank you. So for the audience, moving forward, our idea now is really to get into discussion and have your questions. So please continue with the questions. And before, I wanted just to give you a sense of the experts that we now have in the Zoom room. So what we'll do is just a quick intro of Travis, Dina, Fernanda, and Andre, so that you get a sense of the people who are here and what they offer you in terms of expertise, and how they can offer you advice and assistance with what's going on. So Dina, would you like to start? A little bit about yourself, a little bit about Legatum?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So just for the audience, my name is Dina Sharif. I'm the Executive Director of the Legatum Center for Development and Entrepreneurship. And the center was really built on a very basic premise that entrepreneurship is a very important factor in this pathway to sustainable development for emerging markets. And as a result, we focus very much on the role entrepreneurship can play in creating much more prosperous societies within emerging markets. I personally come from over 20 years of a career in sustainable development from different angles. So I've worked in the private sector, the public sector, and in civil society. I have my own company based out of Cairo. I'm Egyptian, so I am from an emerging market. I'm also an investor. I'm a partner in a venture capital fund that focuses on fintech in Egypt. And I've been working in the space of purpose-driven or principle-driven entrepreneurship for over a decade now.
Great, thanks. So Travis, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and REAP, or the Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, which there have been many teams in Latin America, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Chile, Peru, Ecuador. Oh, hold on, you got it.
There we go. Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Travis Hunter. I direct the MIT Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program. We affectionately call it REAP to kind of shorten that name. So what we do is we work with teams of leaders from around the world and how they support their regional innovation ecosystem. We take this approach where we don't want to help regions recreate another version of Silicon Valley, but instead to think about the strengths in the domains that they are really good at in their particular region and build on those. And so we have a 2-year program that teams apply to, and they essentially go through this cohort-based process where they're working with teams from all around the world, their peers, and essentially they're analyzing their region and understanding where there are key bottlenecks for people to start scalable types of ventures, and then addressing those through new programs or policies that are very much directed towards the specific kind of cultural and situational context of that region. We work with a number of faculty around Sloan. Dina teaches with the program as well as Bill. And I look forward to kind of sharing a little bit more about our approach and some of the thought leadership in this area.
Thank you. And so for the audience, the idea is not to just give you a sense of North America or North America, Middle East, but to give you the real situation in Latin America. So we have 2 Legatum Fellows with us here, and the Legatum Fellows is a great program. I work with admissions, and all of the entrepreneurs who come from Latin America who apply to Sloan always ask, can I be a Legatum Fellow? Can I be a Legatum Fellow? So here are 2 real Legatum Fellows. And so we'll start with Fernanda, and then Andrea, if you could tell us a little bit, Fernanda, about the startup Play business that you founded, and what you've been doing, and then we'll move to you, Andrea, as the last person.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Fernanda de Velasco. A little bit about myself. So before I co-founded Play Business, I worked for more than 6 years in corporate banking at HSBC and at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, covering the largest companies in Latam. I did my MBA at MIT, and as Lee was saying, I was a Legatum Fellow for 2 years before coming back to Mexico to work full-time on Play Business. Right now, I'm in charge of structuring all of the investment rounds that we publish and developing all the new financial structures and investment products in the company. About Play Business, well, Play Business is a fintech through which anyone can invest small amounts in different companies or in different projects through an equity or a revenue-based financing structure. So just so you get a sense of our company, so we have around 100K users. We have transacted more than $20 million for these companies. And half of this amount, we transacted it during last year. And basically what we're doing is trying to grow, to go to Latam, and to continue democratizing investments in the region. I don't know, Lee, if you want me to talk about what we have been doing during the pandemic. Or...
Well, how about we get Andrea to tell us a little bit, and then we'll go right there. So I think That's exactly where we're heading, Fernanda. Andrea?
Hi, can you hear me?
All good.
Cool. So hello, everyone. I'm André from Brazil. Before doing my MBA at MIT, I also started my career at Merrill Lynch, so I did not know we had that in common, Fernanda. I was a financial structurer for Merrill for 5 or 6 years, and then I worked as a product manager for a fintech in Hong Kong. Then I moved to MIT. At MIT, I started Zippy. Zippy is a fintech that helps Brazilians gig economy workers. Our first product is a credit card that is tailor-made for gig workers. So very excited to share more about it later.
Yeah, so in thinking about that and this anti-fragile idea, can you each speak from what you've been seeing or in your respective industries, how the pandemic has changed things, and how have you been able to pivot to that and actually, as Andrea and Fernanda said, been successful in keeping things alive? Whoever wants to take it first, yeah? Andrea, Fernanda?
Sure.
Go ahead, Fernanda.
Okay, perfect. So definitely everything changed. Here, what I can tell you is that our star investment product For example, it became completely unattractive because we were funding restaurants, hotels, gyms, and of course, after the pandemic, people didn't want to invest in that. So we quickly had to change and rebuild our pipeline and like take everything that we have been working for in several months and say, so this is not going to work, and just started looking for other industries, other companies. We basically needed to test the hypothesis that are people not willing to invest, or they just don't want to invest in this type of companies. So we started moving really, really fast. And what I can tell you, we actually tested this hypothesis last week. And we, instead of funding these restaurants or these gyms, we funded one of Mexico's most important peer-to-peer lending platforms, another fintech. And we raised around 500K in 6 hours. So when we saw that, we realized that, okay, so things are stabilizing, people still want to invest, things are moving on, but we had to change our strategy completely. And one of the things that helped us definitely is that we have one of our core values in the company is embrace change. So even though instead of just holding on to what we have been doing for the past few months, we have to adapt, adjust, and start adapting to this new reality.
Well, that's awesome. That's really, motivational. So 500K immediately. That's really great. And so because we keep on talking about teams, did you hire new people? What was your general strategy? Because that's a huge investment, right?
Yes. So actually what we always say is our biggest asset is our team. Like nobody has done this in Latin America, so we couldn't hire someone who had already experience in what we were doing because we were creating an industry. So it took us a lot of time, we invested a lot of time and resources in our team and to train them. So when this pandemic hit, the first priority was to protect our team, to keep them safe, and to leverage our biggest asset. Because what we thought it was, so this is going to end. We don't know when this is going to end, but after it ends, we're going to need this team again to go back on track, to keep growing. So what we did is talk to everyone, communicate, like being really transparent and say, okay, we have to change a lot of our plans and we have to execute really, really quickly. And we trusted a lot in them. I mean, we have a really amazing team and a really smart people. So we told them, like, this is the time where we test all of our core values. When we say we hire smart people, that we embrace change, that we face adversity, like this is the time to prove it. And we started doing a lot of different projects. And as I was telling you, like changing the strategy and executing. And I'm happy to say that we were able to keep everyone. I mean, we didn't hire anyone new, but we kept the 42 people that are working here. And we basically just changed like some of the priorities or some of the objectives or the projects that they were working on.
Excellent. So Andre, I know with you and Zippy, you have a lot of news during the pandemic. And I know the last time you and I spoke, Zippy was growing out of control and you didn't know how to manage all of the HR and how do we hire and how do we make a great team. So can you tell us a little bit what's going on? How have you been surviving the pandemic and what advice you would give the audience?
Yeah, totally. So I guess, Lee, the first thing I wanted to say is we are handling the pandemic very well because we were already, we run a very lean team. So we were kind of prepared for an event like that. So it's very exciting to hear from Fernanda that she was able to keep everyone because we were also able to keep everyone. And I think that's more of a byproduct of really being concerned about being as efficient as possible and, only making critical hires and not necessarily just scaling your team because you have more money. So the story of Zippy since we spoke is that we came out of Y Combinator. We raised a significant seed round, and that was about 6 or actually 7 months ago. And then we made a conscious decision to not grow our team super fast because we were not still excited with the solution we were providing. And that was the key decision that allowed us to really thrive when the pandemic hit, because our team was lean. So the first thing we did was, okay, so let's figure out what we have to do in terms of financial healthiness of the company. And all we did was renegotiate contracts with all service providers to be even more efficient and lower the cash burn. But we managed to keep the whole team. And from that point on, it was much more about, all right, so what unique opportunities do we have now to learn things about our audience, to learn things about our solution that we wouldn't be able to do before, or we wouldn't be inclined to do before, because the world has changed dramatically. And now we face an opportunity to run some crazy experiments that allows us to move even faster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so can you give us, because someone asked about service, can you give us one of these crazy experiments that you've been testing during the crisis? Because it's good to know what people are doing, because what you hear mostly is, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, I don't have money, there's nothing. But it seems that both you and Fernanda are taking chances during the crisis and learning from it. So if you could give us an example, that would be great.
Totally, yeah. So I'll give you two things that we did that I think were very interesting. The first one is we decided to waive all interest rate fees for 2 months for all clients, which no other financial institution in Latin America, sorry, not Latin America, I cannot speak for Latin America, but at least in Brazil, no other financial institution did. So we were like, what happens when we actually tell our customers that if they want to carry a balance on their credit cards indefinitely for 2 months, they can do so, and we're not going to charge interest, right? So that was the first thing. And to our surprise, it actually did not change the behavior of people. So it did not affect repayment rates. It did not affect the way people use the card, because for them it was more important to actually have the constant limit and using it for day-to-day cash flow gaps that they needed even more so now because of the pandemic, than actually carrying that indefinitely. And the second thing was we at the time that the pandemic hit, we were exclusively serving Uber drivers and no one else. And we were like, okay, so now at least in São Paulo, we had a massive drop of traffic, and Uber drivers were basically getting unemployed. It's funny because the way I always sold my business is my audience never gets unemployed, and Uber drivers were unemployed. And then we're like, all right, so where else can we find other verticals, and who is thriving? What kind of gig workers are thriving in this pandemic? And then that's when we switched to also serving ride-hailing ride-hailing motorbiker drivers, people that deliver food everywhere. And of course that was booming because everyone was home ordering stuff. And with that experiment, all of a sudden we targeted just bikers, and then over 300 professions from other verticals started applying for the card. And we're like, well, we learned much faster that our addressable market is much bigger than we thought. And we're like, and then it got me thinking, how long would it have taken us to actually open up to a bigger market had this pandemic not started? So I think that was kind of like how we joined the pandemic and started broadening our product and offering it to even more people.
That's great, Andre. I from Chile, I saw, and I've heard it in Argentina, many places, the delivery area that was weak, or it wasn't like the US with Amazon overnight, is now extremely successful. People are getting everything to their houses. There's no longer fear of ordering online. So again, like Bill said, you got to embrace the opportunities, and it seems that you're both doing that. Taking a step back, more question for Dina. Can you pick up a little bit on this notion of fragility and emerging markets that Bill gave us? Because Bill gave us a very US, North America view. Can you give us a more world emerging markets that Latin America is, Africa? What's going on in this second, I don't want to call it tier, but not the US, Europe, but everyone else. What are you seeing, and what advice can you give entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, I just wanted to say, you know, the Legatum Fellowship is a flagship program for the Legatum Center, and to Fernanda and Andre, we're so proud of what you guys are doing. And you definitely represent the Legatum Center in the best way possible. And for those in the audience, the Legatum Fellowship is a program that supports students at MIT who are building businesses in emerging markets. So I just wanted to say that to the both of you, make us extremely proud. Lee, your question is very interesting. I think this morning I happened to have breakfast with a former mentor of mine, and you know, I was telling her, never have I been more proud, or never have I felt more privileged to actually be from an emerging market than I have these days. And I say this for a number of reasons. One, I think being in the US, you are so exposed to all these conversations of how do entrepreneurs weather the storm of COVID? How do we get through this shock? How do we make it so that our businesses continue to survive? And in an emerging market, you know, being in a shock is just the name of the game. You deal with so many shocks your entire life is a daily shock. You know, the struggles that you experience every day in an emerging market, you know, it's so normal and so mainstream. And I've been talking to so many entrepreneurs in the Middle East, and I know it's not different than what is being seen in Latin America. And the global pandemic is a problem, but is it causing deep anxiety, or is it seen as a massive shock to the system? I think it's just perceived as just another shock that they have to deal with. And in that sense, I think that is a huge, maybe privilege is not the right word, but it is, because the innate resilience that you build up just being in an emerging market gets translated in everything you do when you're running your business here. And I think that resilience has allowed a lot of entrepreneurs in emerging markets to quickly pivot, to be agile, to respond to what is happening as an opportunity. That's not to say that we haven't seen businesses or entrepreneurs struggle or not survive the pandemic, but I've also seen so many examples of entrepreneurs who have used this as an opportunity and who have been able to respond and keep their teams intact and to continue to grow and thrive. And I think that is very much a result of the fact that, you know, fragility is the name of the game when you're in markets like Mexico or Egypt or Brazil. So I think if I were to give advice to entrepreneurs in emerging markets, it would be to remember that just existing your day-to-day life builds natural resilience, and to really use that as a tool to continue to propel forward in times that are uncertain, which is something that most people are used to anyway while you're managing a business in the markets that we exist in. I think the only other piece of it, there's so much I would say in terms of advice, but time is limited. So I think a lot of people talk about scarcity of resources. How do we get through with such a scarcity of resources at our hands in terms of cash, in terms of everything that you need to run a business? And I think it's really time to move beyond that scarcity mindset. And I say this because if you take a moment to stop, you realize that, you know, there's so many assets that you can make use of, especially during a crisis, if you move beyond that scarcity mindset and move to a place of abundance and thinking about all the assets that exist kind of bottom up and how to use that to continue to grow and evolve. And I think that is an extremely important mindset shift to have when you're going through a crisis like COVID-19 that is global in scope and that will have huge amount of impact on every economy around the world. To really take that as a moment to shift mindset and to think about what you can really use that you normally wouldn't use to keep going forward.
Great. And just thinking about that and making sure that the audience knows we see your questions and we want more. Travis, before I get to you, Andre or Fernando, can you speak about how the negotiation skills of you guys doing what you've done has changed now that everything is virtual. This question comes from Utkarash. He was wanting to know whether business negotiation or other negotiations are now going to change. And have you felt it in your own markets because of this virtual aspect where you're not going into someone and pitching in, right? You don't have that feeling of, you know, like this person, not like this person. It's all a virtual sense. So have you felt that in your areas? Have you felt that in what's been going on with what you've been doing?
So from my end, I can tell you that yes, we have felt some differences. Of course, it's not the same like being in the same place, but what we have seen, it's also like our negotiations have changed in a way that instead of just saying like, hey, let's do business, we everyone has more like a mindset of, I want to understand what's happening to you, like we want to support each other, and we have to find things or structures or businesses that work for a lot of us or for both of us. So I have seen a lot of empathy and a lot of connection, even though we're talking through Zoom or Hangouts. And before I thought that, especially because like when you have a B2B part in your business, like I thought that it was not the same, but people, I think they are adjusting, and they like now know that we have to start connecting in different ways. And at least for us, I can tell you that before we were sure that we had to go back and have a big office to have clients, and now clients are more up to like these type of connections, and it has been working. So
Perfect. Andre, do you have any ideas, advice on that?
Well, not necessarily tied to negotiation. I think I kind of agree with everything Fernanda said. I just wanted to go back to her last point, which is a remote-friendly office. This is also something we learned, and it has worked quite amazing for us. Before we were like, well, we need to be everyone in the same office. It's better, it builds culture. And now we're actually finding creative ways of building culture, despite the fact that the office, well, we still have the office, but until last week it was closed, like no one was allowed to come. And now we're probably going to try a hybrid of remote friendly. You can work from wherever you want, but there's this one office that if you want to show up whenever you can or want to, it will be there. And honestly, I'm amazed at how the company has embraced the remote culture, and actually works very well for us. And talking to other entrepreneurs, the feedback is always the same. I don't think I remember someone saying that it was a bad experience. So that's I think that's definitely something that will change the industry forever.
So building a strong culture early on has helped through the pandemic for both of you. So now a question for Travis. So part of REAP is bringing 5 different players to the table, one of them being government. And there's a question from Argentina. What would you give for aspiring entrepreneurs in emerging markets where the government does not cooperate? Would you still see the country as an opportunity? Would you encourage us or to run away and start our business abroad? So Travis, what's your feeling? Because you've dealt with a lot of emerging markets where the governments sometimes are weak, or sometimes they use entrepreneurship as a marketing more than anything. So what would you tell Bautista about how to deal with entrepreneurs where governments are actually weak, and what's the best way to get governments involved?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I have kind of a couple of points. One is what we're seeing is that the economic crisis is not hitting every region and every type of business equally, right? And so the recovery is not going to be equal either. And we know that because we see that across the world, how these different kind of economic development strategies are looking at reacting to the results of the pandemic, right? We see mixed attitudes where some are overwhelmed by the crisis. There is consolidation of power and some really major challenges politically. But then we see others that are engaged in the crisis today and looking forward to tomorrow. For regions that are in that kind of earlier stage where there's just a lot of kind of tumult in the region, I think one thing to think about is we operate on this stakeholder model, as Lee mentioned. So we try to engage universities, governments, corporates, risk capital providers, as well as entrepreneurs. And a lot of times during crisis, you do see some of these other stakeholders step up and take a leading role in supporting entrepreneurship. It's not always going to be the government. And so I think about some of the stakeholders that are in your network that are still in a place of resiliency and they're able to support the entrepreneurial community, maybe your startup in particular. A lot of times what we see that looking like is going to be some sort of set of consortiums for corporations. Sometimes there are really interesting kind of investor relationships where they'll set up, really important kind of support mechanisms for their startups that they've invested in. And then maybe one of the most common is going to be the university, which is usually kind of a strong and steady kind of bastion for any ecosystem. And so I would say, in ecosystems where you see a lot of tumult in the government and the response, look towards other stakeholders that can really support you.
And so I think for anyone who wants to take the question, there's a question about funding. So someone wanted to know, Fernanda and Andre, when were you funded, at what step? But I think more generally, funding during the pandemic. So if you want to answer first how you got funded, but funding during the pandemic, what's your feelings? Should people wait it out, right? There's always this thing, do we wait it out? But if we follow what Bill said, the crisis is going to be endless. So how long do you wait it out? What advice would you give people, or Travis or Dino, what you've been hearing? What's your feelings about that? And I leave it open for whoever would like to pick it up.
Yeah, I can start. I think if you can, wait it, right? I think that's the best answer right now. Particularly with Zippy, I think we were very lucky in terms of timing because we raised a seed round like a few months before the pandemic hit. So we were not looking to fundraise. We do not need to fundraise right now, which is, I guess, the ideal scenario. And my advice would be try to work with what you have. And if you can't, then go after money. But what I've seen based on speaking with venture capitalists and also other entrepreneurs in Brazil is that the negotiation leverage has definitely swayed to the investor side again. I think we've seen a couple years of that pendulum going to the entrepreneurial side, especially in Latin America, after a bunch of big names, big VCs started pouring money in the region. And I think that has changed it again back to the investors. So it's definitely a matter of how much you need versus you want. That's what I think.
So we weren't as lucky as Andre. We actually we closed a round, and the disbursement was going to be on March 31st. But after the pandemic hit, they basically told us like material adverse change. So sorry, we have to delay it. So it changed a lot of our plans. And to be honest, in Latin America, even before the pandemic, like raising capital, it's not as easy. Like you don't have the same access as in other markets. And now it's in terms of like VC funding, I would also say wait, because like these traditional options are no longer an option right now. These investors are looking for like less risky options, or they are focusing on their current portfolio. But what I would say for companies that are not like in such a like good position or that have enough runway, I would recommend like looking at alternative financing options, because the reality is that you need cash to buy enough time, to have enough time to go through these, or to implement all the ancillary measures that you have to implement to get out of this. So you only have to buy time, enough time to survive. So what we have been seeing is that even though traditional options are not as viable right now, alternative options like play business are gaining traction. And the reflection of that is like this company that I was telling you about. I mean, they are a great company. They are just about to get like the approval from the banking commission to become a fintech. Probably they are going to be one of the first ones to get it. And they are an amazing company and they have an amazing traction, but VCs are not funding anything right now. So alternative financing, it's actually becoming more and more attractive.
Dina, you wanted to say
Fernanda,
something?
when you say alternative financing, are you talking about banks? Like
No,
loans, debt, or are you talking about philanthropy? Are you talking about crowd financing or?
I'm talking about fintech, like debt crowdfunding or revenue-based financing. So anything banks, if VCs are not investing, banks in Mexico, and I know that because I was a banker, definitely they are not lending a lot of money.
No,
right
they're
now.
not. They're not. They're going right back to being extremely risk averse.
Yeah.
Even when we started seeing movements in the banking sector look more towards investing in startups and innovation, they've retreated right back.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, Lee, thanks. I think there are a couple of things I want to say about the investor space. The Legatum Center has had a number of conversations with venture capitalists from around the world, specifically venture capitalists who have an interest in emerging markets and who have invested in emerging markets, including Latin America. And I think, Andre, maybe you're right. And maybe I would say superficially, you're seeing the pendulum shift again towards investors. But I think it's important to realize that over the past decade, what we've seen within the entrepreneurship space are extremely high valuations, higher than what they should be. And what we've also seen is entrepreneurs tend to consume a lot of cash and burn through a lot of cash unnecessarily. And I think emerging markets, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in emerging markets, to your point, have demonstrated that they can be lean, and often cases they are lean because conserving cash is also the name of the game when you're in an emerging market, right? Having said that, a lot of venture capitalists became very concerned that entrepreneurs were not conserving enough cash, or what businesses should they give more cash to, so they were going through their own, I think, a whole range of questions themselves as venture capitalists. Were they investing the right way? Were they contributing to this issue of valuations that were too high? Were they not working with entrepreneurs to teach them how to better conserve cash? There were a lot of questions that they had to ask themselves as well. And I think if I were to give advice to entrepreneurs, if you're going to raise venture capital money, you really also need to show how sound your business model is, the extent to which your business model is agile and has an ability to pivot along with shocks. COVID-19 is a shock, but it's not going to be the last shock that we're going to see over the upcoming years. We're going to see many shocks emerge. And I think what venture capitalists have come to realize is they need to see business models that can pivot when necessary and react to shocks in a way that is agile and that will allow them to continue to exist. And having said that, I think Fernanda, to your point, we're not seeing as much venture capital these days, and maybe it's not the best source to go to, but I also see another trend of venture capitalists are keeping their eyes on the new sectors that are emerging. So when it comes to the almost overnight virtualization of sectors like education, and finally seeing things like telemedicine become a real possibility, and fintech, we're seeing countries that are who were so resistant to fintech, and where we saw laws and regulations completely block that sector. We're seeing things shift so fast. I think a lot of people in the venture capital space are thinking, well, where are we going to put our money? What are the new things that are emerging? And for that, they have to pause, right? You really have to pause and see, you know, how are things going to evolve, as opposed to invest too quickly, but really see how these sectors are going to emerge. So I would say to those entrepreneurs who are working in these sectors where the almost overnight virtualization, but also digitization has opened up so many doors, I would think that within the next 6 months, we're going to see venture capitalists play an even bigger role again in driving these sectors forward. But they're also taking a moment, just like everybody else, to pause and reflect and think about where they went wrong and how they need to pivot as well, because definitely they need to pivot. And they need to rethink the way that they were investing. And specifically when it comes to emerging markets, because entrepreneurs play an extremely valuable role when it comes to building up not just the economies, but solving some of the biggest problems we face in these emerging markets. We depend on entrepreneurs to solve these problems just as much as we depend on donor aid or philanthropy. More and more, we're looking towards entrepreneurs to solve these big challenges. And I think venture capitalists are going to need to also think about how they can invest in entrepreneurs that are solving for these big problems, right?
And
Thank
Dina, just a quick comment to your point. I totally agree with what you said. And I think now is probably one of the best times ever to start a company, even though it might be hard to get money. I am 100% aligned with your prediction that in 6 months, you're going to see a bunch of VC funding, crazy ideas. I think one thing I learned in the fundraising journey is that one of the main questions you get is why now? So I think good startup businesses are ones that have a very good reason to exist now, but didn't have 1 year before. And that's actually it generally comes from either a new piece of technology or society changing significantly for some reason, or both. And I think we are at a time that you can see both things happening at once. So it's extremely exciting to start a business now. I think there's a bunch of things to do.
Oh, 100%. And I would always say, never waste a good crisis, right? This is an amazing opportunity to see all kinds of new innovations emerge. So I agree, it's a great time to start a business, but I would say it's a great time to start a business that's solving one of these problems that we now see so clearly. And the capital will follow.
So being mindful of everyone's time, I'm going to plug the MIT 100K Latam again. If you need some cash and you win the competition, it's some free cash and mentoring and some publicity. So please apply. But being that we're going to close, what I'd like is if we could just go around one last time. And if each of you, if there is one piece of indispensable advice you can provide the audience. It's been said, right? More crises will happen. The brightest stars will shine. Start something now, experiment, do all these things that you wouldn't have done. What is, aside from these things, what would you provide the audience with? What would you tell them? Again, the point of this is to offer help, advice, and to be useful to the audience. So I'm going to start with you, Dina, and I'm going to go counterclockwise. So Fernanda, you're the last. So it'll be most difficult for you. But what's the advice, the last thing you would offer, Dina, aside from what's been mentioned to this LATAM or emerging markets audience?
I think I kind of stick by my last statement, never waste a good crisis. And this is, this is just one of many shocks, and use this as an opportunity to create new things and to really help your countries, your markets evolve and move ahead. So that's where I would leave everybody with.
Travis?
There you go. So I would say, knowing that our audience is mixed, it's not all entrepreneurs in the audience. This is kind of for everybody. I would say identify, connect, and support the entrepreneurs that are really tenacious, the ones that are going to make a huge difference during this really challenging time. And then also support the investors that don't have we were just talking about money a little bit, investors that don't have the networks, the privilege of, large VCs. And so I think we need to be able to keep both in mind to be able to support some of those earlier stage ventures in each one of these regions.
Andre?
I'm going to say something really basic, but I think it helps a lot, specifically founders. Never stop talking to your customers. I think it's easy to lose grasp of that as you grow, but as long as you remain very, very close to your customers and have a curious and open mind about what's happening, I think you're going to be just fine.
Awesome. Fernanda?
So I would say always have options or alternative plans. What we always say at Play Business is that one option is no option, two options are a dilemma, and three options, now we're really talking and having, you actually have options. And always protect or invest in your team, like they are your greatest asset. And the reality is that they are the ones who can help you get out of this, and that you're going to need them once things stabilize, and then to keep growing and going back on track. And of course, cash is king, always. I always say that to Latin entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Legatum Fellows. Thank you, Zippy, Playbook. Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Travis and Reap and the Martin Trust. Please stay connected with us with MIT Sloan and the different entrepreneurial programs, with the MIT Global Programs Office. And if you have any questions, I'll put my email in the chat. But thank you for your time. Stay healthy and stay creative and innovative. It's going to be a long haul out there. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.